Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be looking at some of the top defense teams that I think currently exist, and specifically we're going to be looking at the toon's weapons, because weapons are really what makes or breaks a team. It's not only about the toon's combinations, but by having strong weapons, you are having a huge advantage when you play against really anyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more content and information. Now, when we get into it, we take a look at this defense team. We see Aaron, who was just a free-to-play toon, and he's actually a huge tank. Ever since his active skill was changed to be a turn 2, he's become more effective because he's able to basically neuter most attack teams that rely upon rushes. In later matches, the way I kind of countered that a bit was using my 6-star yellow Maggie because Maggie has an active impair recovery. Now, some of these weapons that I'm facing are, in my opinion, nearly ridiculous. With a lot of these toons having bound weapons, the fact that they have special weapons attached to them that are not their bound weapons tells me it caused a lot of armory tokens and time in order to make these weapons possible. This type of team is very difficult for a player like myself who's free to play. You have an S-Class Human Shield, who has an elusive impair weapon. You have S-Class Princess, who is a great offensive and defensive toon with a turn 2 active taunt that also normalizes characters. You have Aaron, who is an S-Class character that is very tanky, gives HP and defense to all blue and yellow toons. Also, his active skill impairs, I think it's 3 toons, as well as does AP down. You have Rosita, S-Class Bide toon. This type of team is just super tanky, and it's teams like that that are just very difficult for me to actually work through, even if I'm to use a defense debuff like Diego, for example. What I've noticed a lot with a lot of the top players now, they're going back to more of a tanky defense setup instead of one that rushes fast, and that's mainly because, well, at least in my opinion, it's because people can counter it by running a payback on attack, and payback toons are a lot more common now, especially because Wayland is in the war wheel, and I believe he as well as Negan have been in past wheels that have been available for free-to-play players as well. So it just seems like the meta is in a full shift, and I personally fully expect for WOC3 to see a lot more toons that have weapons like this, for example. Just a super tanky weapon on an S-Class character. 35 HP, 35% defense, impenetrable defense, so when being attacked, a better chance to reduce the damage to 0, and then can also apply 20% slow to the enemy for a couple turns. 12% HP to a line of toons, so just increasing 2 toons HP by a lot, especially when it's an S-Class toon, because 12% on, say, 6,000 HP is another 720 HP, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we're thinking in terms of like bleed, burn, and maim, it's a huge amount. Then we get into toons like Mercer, who have 46% attack, but then have this team player ability, and I encourage anyone who has an offensive lead to work on getting this version of team player on their leader, because this ability will affect all surrounding teammates, instead of it being on a supporting toon that is off to one side and can only affect up to 2 other teammates. I would definitely say this is one of the best stats to craft on a leader toon, especially if they have a bound weapon and they're on offensive toon. Like personally, for my Mercer, I'm trying to get an elusive impair weapon for defense for him and leaving a stun attack weapon for him on offense. So this next toon that we're looking at is Aaron, defensive toon, huge bonus to AP when taking damage, bonus AP to all teammates, so this is for a fast rushing defensive team. It also has the additional attack and crit, so the team player again, but he's a leader toon. It's a bit interesting to have on a defensive character, but at the same time, if your goal is to run a heavy defensive team that can also apply attack, so like if you have Princess, for example, or Priya with Rampage, this can be very effective. The next craft on Shiva I think is really clever. So they left the bleed on Shiva, which I think is smart because bleed damage is a set amount, and it's very tough to recover from this bleed because it's only a 1-turn bleed, but adding on reduced crit damage by 50%. So if someone does normalize Shiva and they are attacking her, they're still probably going to use a toon like Priya or any toon that has multi-attacking rushes. So a prime enemy of Shiva, for example, would be Henyon with Crit Expert, because he would get a critical hit every single time if he has Crit Expert. So this is a great way at reducing that damage because he already has a trait damage advantage. Moving on now to a Frost character. I really like this weapon. It'd be a bit better with an elusive impair weapon, but the 45% defense, huge bonus to AP when taking damage is smart, especially on a human shield. The impair, so of course when being attacked, can impair the enemy, and again, this reduced crit damage by 50%. So prime enemy is still Henyon here. Lots of people who use Priyas on attack. This would just reduce a bunch of different types of damages. I think he's a really tanky and great character to have. Frost is definitely on my list of a toon to get. Next we have another Frost weapon that's a bit more tankier because we have HP on it instead of a huge bonus to AP. We also have a bonus 12% defense to align, which in this case works out really well because they increase the defense on the weapon more. So that means the defense is getting buffed even further. So if instead they got bonus HP to align, I can imagine that they would have tried to increase the HP on Frost instead, just based on how the fourth slot would have interacted with the first slot a bit more instead of the second slot. Now, you'll notice that there have been a ton of blue and yellow toons on defense, and that's just because the current meta has a lot of blue toons, as well as some decent yellow ones. We're kind of waiting on reds and greens to catch up to an extent. Now, we did just get S-Class Nikki, so hopefully that'll change things up a bit. Right now we're looking at a Slater, and he has a bound weapon, which makes him a little tricky. I kind of expect this person to change his weapon to be an elusive impair weapon with basically the same things going on. The bonus HP every turn for every blue teammate, and this includes dead teammates, so this bonus HP can be really helpful for keeping your toon alive, of course, and only Bleed, Burn, and Maim can ignore bonus HP. Otherwise, everything else has to go through it, except for Infection. This next weapon that Angel has, I think this weapon would also be very good on a Frost, just because the Light Daze effect. So when taking a critical hit, there's a 30% chance to daze the enemy for their next 2 turns. So this would be really good against like a Princess team, for example, or Priya, of course. More so Princess because of her active skill, and because so many people are running that team player ability on their center toon, it does mean that all other toons now have a higher chance of performing a critical hit, which in most cases is good, but in the case of Light Daze, it is not advisable. So if this was on a Frost and the opponent didn't have a focus ability, they have a high chance of attacking this toon with this weapon, and you can't disarm the 4th slot. Next we have another Aaron, and he's kind of similar to the other Aaron that we saw before. Impenetrable defense again, HP, huge bonus to AP when attacking, but the last slot, so 25% chance to heal one teammate by 50%. I had this on my Mercer, but I reset my weapon to try and get team player on it. I just didn't find it was happening frequently enough. When it did work, it did elongate the match, but at 25%, I would rather have a better chance, which is about 35% chance. The next toon that we're going to be looking at is Dayu, and she has this guarding axe that automatically has absolute defense on it, which I think is a brilliant weapon. A huge bonus to AP when attacking, 45% defense, which is interesting. You'd think that there'd be some crit on it just because she can apply crosshairs on a critical hit. I also find the defense interesting instead of HP because she does have Stonewall, meaning her defense cannot be reduced. So you'd think that they'd want to stack up on HP more because you know that her defense is always going to be at least this amount or greater if you end up applying a defensive buff. Almost the identical weapon that Dayu has is something that this Leopo holds, and I think this is also really great and really effective. Leopo, when she's able to rush, she really neuters any attack team because she causes daze, impair, attack down, and it's just a really all-encompassing rush. The only downside is it's 85 AP. When we move on to Henyon, this is a defensive Henyon. obviously, by the 43% defense, a huge bonus to AP when attacking, the impenetrable defense, and then oddly enough, they have this team player ability. So I'm guessing this is a type of weapon that is also run on an Aaron, for example, as the leader, because that way that crit and attack would be applied to all other teammates, and the defense, of course, on a defensive leader would make sense. So that's a little interesting to me. This is another very interesting tune that I saw on defense with the guarding axe again. Steve also has the reduced critical damage by 50%, and to be honest, I'm thinking about running Steve on defense just because I expect to see more infection tunes on attack, especially Mateo, and Steve's active skill can recover some infection, so I think I might end up utilizing him again. Next up, we have our very common Priya with a double attack weapon as well as Rampage. Now, ideally, we'd want 50% attack, and we'd want the double attack ability at 175% attack with the additional crit chance that comes with it, so that would actually trigger Rampage more often. This is okay, but it's just not ideal. This next weapon on Angel is a little confusing to me. It seems like it should be a weapon on like Mercer or another leadership tune, so like even Priya, if you were trying to do a turn 1 attack. It's just that this offensive weapon doesn't really fit Angel's defensive build. I'm guessing that they only had this on the team because of the team player ability and Angel was the lead, but this is the type of weapon that I would definitely see on a Priya, for example, because even without Rampage, it could be super effective if you're able to get her rushing on that first turn because she still has 3 attacks on that rush. So the last tune that we're going to be looking at is another Mercer tune, and it has that same 5% bonus HP to 2 other teammates every turn for every other tough teammate on the team. So this is actually a pretty effective weapon, especially if you're running a mainly blue team. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video. I hope this gave you a good idea about what people are actually crafting on weapons and why they're doing it.